Thank
Wonderful.
you. Thank
She
you.
is.
Oh.
Okay, Roberta, would you mind reading the roll call, please?
So we have John,
Here.
Eric,
Here.
Heather, David, Ryan,
Present.
Laura,
Present.
and I believe we are missing, in addition to Jahan, Joe.
Okay, thank you very much. First on the agenda is the approval of minutes from way back in July. So I'll open up for any comments about those minutes.
Mm-mm.
Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Motion.
Yep.
Anyone a second?
I'll second it then.
Thank you. Roberto, can you read the roll?
Just a moment. We have Laura.
Yes.
Sorry, I can't see very well. John,
Yes.
Joe, not present. And Heather,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and Ryan.
Yes.
That is 6, 7. I'm trying to count how many of you there are. It passes unanimously.
Good enough. Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's
I
okay.
am multitasking. I only have one little tiny screen, so I'm trying to see all of you and see the next thing on the screen at the same time.
Understood. Well, I'll try to delay a couple seconds for you before we go on to our second agenda
That's
item.
all right. I've
which-
got the second agenda item. I am ready. I'm queued up.
All right, fantastic. Feel free to take us out, Roberta. We're discussing a transfer of a grant related to the Blessings of the Bay Park, I believe, if memory serves, to the city. So, Roberta, if you can brief us on that.
Yes. So I have provided a memorandum that is really just to your attention to for your information to share with the committee that when the grant for the Blessing of the Bay Park improvement was made last year, it should have been, the recommendation should have been drafted in such a way that the grant would be used by the city rather than the grant going to Myra to actually carry out the construction. So everyone is in agreement that the city is actually leading the project to carry out the construction for this project, but just to maintain a paper trail, we have, I have asked that Myra provide a memorandum informing the committee that the project is actually going to be carried out by the city instead of Myra.
Great. And given that they will be providing a memorandum, is any vote or proclamation or any statement by the CPC necessary in that case?
This is an unprecedented situation. So it, I think that perhaps just to be safe, since we have you here, someone can make a motion to confirm to approve the transfer of the grant to the city from Myra. That way we have it in our minutes that you agreed to that transfer. I cannot tell you for certain whether it's necessary or not, but so that we don't have to come back at a later time with this agenda item again, why don't we just go ahead and ask for
Before we
yes.
do that,
Yes, David.
I'm a little confused about the process. I absolutely understand the
Mhm.
goal, which was that we want the money to go to the city so the city can do the work.
Yeah.
But was the but the grant was made to Myra, right?
Mhm.
It's a grant, so are we effectively transferring all of it? And the city is gonna have a signed grant with us? I'm trying to figure out who's responsible ultimately now that the work get done and, and all the Ts are crossed.
Mhm.
Is it Myra or is it the city?
So just a little bit of background on this project. You may recall that there were two grants for the Blessing of the Bay project. The first grant was for design, and Myra is leading the project to carry out the design project. But for the construction project, that requires, because it's a construction on city-owned land, it requires that the city be the one to carry out the project. So the grant should have been structured in the first place so that Myra was applying for the funding, but the city is the one who's actually going to be doing the project.
A
Would that have,
little
would that have
additional
resulted in
background.
different, I'm sorry, John, you go on.
I was just going to say, so PSEF has been working with Myra on this grant application, and they just wanted to facilitate the grant process because they had the staff to facilitate it. It's always been understood that PSEF would be facilitating the construction and the construction administration of this project. So Myra is really taking over the design and then handing over 100% construction drawings to the city, in which the city can then go through our engineering permits and put the project out to bid, because we need to make sure that it goes out to bid in a state that follows state procurement laws in a proper way.
Now, would it have been cleaner potentially if just the city became a partner in the grant that we made to Myra for construction?
That would have been clearer if
And
we
we
had
can't-
done it that way in the first place. But when we went back to the application and the recommendation, the language in both said that Myra was receiving the grant. The city, the partnership with the city was not spelled out as we would like it to have been in those documents, which is why we're coming back now to correct the record.
I don't know. I mean, I'm a process guy in some ways, and this strikes me as a weird process. Like I'm still struggling with who's ultimately responsible. If things go south or east or west. Is it Myra that's still on the stick, or would the city be on the stick?
The
Seems to
city
me
would-
it'll be the city
And-
with the acceptance of this motion, yeah.
But the city's not signing anything.
The city will sign a memorandum of agreement
Okay,
to receive the grant.
okay. And that'll compel them to comply with all the terms of the original grant.
Yes,
Okay. That satisfies.
I appreciate the question.
This is, I understand why it's happening, and I agree that it's kind of unfortunate that we sort of thought we were awarding it to this nonprofit, and in essence, we're awarding it to the city, which is okay, but did the estimate cover the kind of the cost that we're gonna have, because it has to now go through the city's bid process and sort of management process in a way that I'm just hoping that the estimate that the construction budget holds, given the changes of management and protocol.
John, go ahead.
So the estimates were always done with the idea that it would be through the city constructing the project. The estimates were based in 2019 or 2018, and they've just had an escalation per year on those. So we do think that the estimates are a little bit low, but we have applied for CIP funding this year and are pursuing other grant sources. We just received a Mass Trails grant for $500,000 that Myra helped facilitate that grant as well. Myra's really just been facilitating and helping us with a lot of the grant work so that we can acquire all the funds to construct this.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay. If no further discussion here, I would love to have a motion.
This is Heather. I'll make a motion to approve the memorandum as written.
And I'll second that.
All right,
Thank you, Roberta.
I will call the roll. John,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
and Heather.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the draft asset protection policy.
All right, so this item, there's a folder in the meeting packet called CPA grant conditions. And this includes two documents. One is for your information. For your information is the, what is it called? The CPA FY24 grant agreement general conditions. These are with very minor edits that have been tweaked within the last year. These are general conditions that were agreed upon by a CPC years ago. By this CPC years ago. And they are attached to every project that every grantee that signs a contract with the city. And I wanted to bring this to your attention because I know that the committee likes to think carefully about conditions to apply to all of the grants that all the recommendations that are made for, any projects that you recommend funding for. And I've noticed that we continue to think along the same lines. Several of the conditions that we have been adding all along have been somewhat redundant to the general conditions that the grantees are already going to be included in their contracts and the grant agreements. So with this set of general conditions in mind, I also wanted to draft an asset protection policy. It has been the committee's practice since early on to require a preservation restriction for every project that receives historic preservation funding. And there's been discussion, at least, about a requirement for some protection of public access to projects that receive either open space or historic preservation funding. And in some cases, a potential requirement for for permanent protection if any private property, which it hasn't happened yet, but if there were private property that was improved for open space and recreation purposes, that would be, in theory, we would require some permanent protection. And in practice, it has turned out to be more complicated than that. In some cases, there are some types of assets for which we provide historic preservation funding where it's impossible to put a preservation restriction on those types of assets, or the preservation restriction is really requiring a commitment from the grantee that is out of scale with the amount of funding that we're providing to them. And so I wanted to, and it's also a preservation restriction is complicated to put in place. It can require, because a preservation restriction in perpetuity can require years actually to draft and have reviewed and approved by the state so that we can execute it and then file it at the registry. And a different kind of preservation restriction, one that is term limited rather than in perpetuity, would not have the same level of state coordination required, so that they're actually easier and quicker to put in place. And thus, for certain types of assets, it might be a more immediate way of ensuring their protection, so that we don't have this gap of years and potentially ever being able to secure protection of those assets. We do have some assets for which we required a preservation restriction years ago, and that was never accomplished, and those assets are still unprotected, and we really don't have any avenue for going back and enforcing on a on a condition for a grant that's already been completed and carried out years ago, and we've essentially lost contact with the grantee. So with that in mind, I'm going to share my screen and present a draft that I've run by some of our staff in the planning department and legal staff to talk about, I think, rationalizing, making a more nuanced policy that requires a preservation restriction or a conservation restriction in the most appropriate way for each type of grant, which has different requirements under different circumstances. So there are a series of flow charts in this document and some bullets at the top. All property acquired with CPA funds must be perpetually preserved for the purpose it was acquired. That is what's stated under the legislation, the state legislation. So we have to abide by that requirement. And then we get to the more nuanced. Grant agreements for all CPA funded historic preservation and open space projects will require that the grant be repaid or sold if substantially altered within a specific timeline, typically 5 years, with a step down provision after that. This is new, not something that we've required. We've required it in a few instances, but it has not been part of our standard conditions previously. The CPC may, at its discretion, require a preservation restriction or conservation restriction according to the flow charts below. The cost of preparing or filing the PR will be covered by the CPA admin funds. And should a stipend or endowment be required to accept the PR or CR, this would come from CPA program area reserves. This has happened in some instances in the past, particularly for conservation restriction that was required for an acquisition project. For projects that entail private property or private entities, the CPC may also recommend conditions to ensure the public can enjoy the benefits of a CPA investment following guidelines. And that's the third flow chart, is potential access requirements. And for projects where a new PR or CR access or license agreement or other form of asset protection may be warranted, draft conditions will be reviewed by law and PSUF or PPC or other relevant city departments prior to being shared with the CPC. So we're just trying to make sure that whatever conditions you put in place are actually going to be commensurate and enforceable.
That's great. Maybe
yeah.
can we pause there and go back up to
Sure,
the
absolutely.
bullet points and just see if there's any reactions from folks? I know that maybe this is a first look for some, but any immediate reactions?
Can we talk a little bit about the second bullet point and how how 5 years was selected as a The window.
This was based on a model that we saw in another community, but the one time that we've applied something like this in the past was for the Adams Magoon House. And there was considerable discussion with the committee about this, and I can't recall, I'd have to go back and look at where we landed. So 5 years is absolutely up for discussion if you
Yeah.
think that there's an appropriate.
Heather, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
I think for Adams Lagoon, I think we landed at 50 years.
50 years if it was sold.
Okay.
And we
But-
don't anticipate it being, the issue is not a change of use. So let me provide an example of a situation, very real life situation that I've seen happen. Say let's say, take an example of a schoolyard improvement. Let's say the CPC funded the improvement of a schoolyard, and then 5 years later, the school department came around and said, you know, actually, we would like to replace the schoolyard with an addition to the building. Right now, we don't have any requirement in place that would address the situation where the grantee turns around and removes the improvement that the CPA funded. So the question is, how long would you like to give for them to change their mind about the improvement that CPA paid for?
Heather, I can just comment briefly about the 5-year window and how I might think about that. So if let's just say for an affordable housing project, I only know this from my work. If an affordable housing project is using historic tax credits, federal historic tax credits or state historic tax credits, the compliance period for those during which a building cannot be sold is 5 years. And so if these funds are kind of layering into a project like that, my guess is that maybe if this 5 years came from another city or town, that might have been the underlying assumption, because often 5 years after an affordable housing project or another housing development that uses historic preservation funds is completed, the ownership often does change, and so that may be part of that provision.
But it's I got the feeling we're not talking about ownership change, we're talking about use change. So let's say money went into, your same example, Ryan, and then in 5 years, the building owner sold it to someone that was going to put in a supermarket. Would 5 years be enough? Or would we want to would we have had an expectation that affordable housing complex was going to be there more than 5 years?
Yeah, it's a good note.
And so I was kind of thinking in the similar lines. I was trying to figure out, well, maybe that clawback period should be commensurate with the anticipated lifetime of, or some, reasonable relationship with the anticipated lifetime of the resource. So, if it's a playground and you expect to replace it in 10 or 15 years, maybe it's only 10 or 15 years. If it's an apartment building and you expect it to be there for 50 years, maybe it's a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So
It also could be a sliding scale based on the amount of the grant.
So what we're saying here is that if it is sold or altered within a 5-year period, the grant gets paid back.
That's right.
And so if I may, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If I may, the bullet here addresses the improvement rather than the ownership. And that's an important distinction because actually one of the projects that we have on this funding cycle is for the Somerville Community Land Trust, which has a model where they intend to request CPA funds for historic preservation improvements. And then after the improvements are completed, they would consider selling the units after putting a deed restriction on them to make them permanently affordable. They would consider selling the units as condominiums. So if they then had to repay the historic preservation grant because of the change in ownership, that would undo the subsidy that we're giving them that helps them to make those units permanently affordable.
That's right.
So ownership, I mean, if it's permanently protected, I don't think ownership is our concern. But the question is, has the improvement that we've invested in been protected?
So if I may, does it make sense in that second bullet point to just strike the 2 words or 3 words, if sold or? Because that does,
if sold,
that does
you're right,
seem
yeah.
to imply that ownership matters. And-
Yes,
But if it's just, it'll be repaid if it's substantially altered
yeah.
over a certain
Yeah.
period of time, then
Yeah,
that kind of addresses what David was talking about in terms of
Yeah,
change
if
of
it's,
use.
if its use is substantially altered,
That's right.
But then
whatever
going back,
substantial, whatever
the Adams
substantial.
Magoon situation, what if that place were to sell in 10 years? And theoretically, they're reaping a financial gain because of something we gave them. That's sort of like another little situation there, which is something that's different than the use angle.
So the committee may still have, I think, discretion to put to put specific conditions on specific properties under certain circumstances. And maybe it's possible to address that circumstance in this policy. That was where it is a private property owner that is not a nonprofit, that you would be looking for. So yeah, that you'd be looking for a to limit the amount of windfall that they can gain from the sale of a property.
Eric, I'm not sure why I care about that in this context. As long as the reason that we funded it is being preserved in the transfer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, if they are making money, I mean, would the flip side be if they lost money out, we'd owe them more money? I mean, I'm not sure.
Well,
You know, I mean, they took the risk of doing the work. They got some funding in order to lock in certain characteristics of it, whether it was open space or historic preservation or whatever. And then as long as that benefit is being protected in the sale, I'm not quite sure that we have an interest on whether they made money on it or not.
well, that's an interesting thought.
I understand the
And-
impulse there, Eric. Joe, sorry, go ahead. Roberta.
I don't want to interrupt your discussion about this.
No, I understand the impulse to ask that question. I personally agree with David. I'd be out of a job if I disagreed with David, but yes, I understand where you're going. What were you gonna say, Roberta?
I was going to point out that the issue of the grant being repayable was what got in the way of being able to move forward with the Adams Magoon project. At the time, the property owner was not comfortable with the grant being repayable, even if it's a long time in the future. And that's why I needed to get an appraisal, and I haven't been able to get to find somebody qualified to give an appraisal of a historic house of that nature. I tried to get different appraisers, and none of them was comfortable with the requirement for to appraise a house under those circumstances. So yeah, the requirement for repayment kind of makes the grant perhaps a less, um, the, it made it difficult for that project, an impediment for that project to be completed.
One other thing I'd note here, if we were just soliciting feedback for future iterations of this, is that I'd be curious to hear from the Affordable Housing Trust, who are actually administering our funds related to affordable housing, what the knock-on effects of effectively an affordability restriction in perpetuity may be. That has really serious ramifications for a lot of financing tools, especially if affordable housing CPA funds are a relatively small part of a capital stack for a project. So it could be worth asking them if they think that's a detriment to folks applying, or if that, makes it a less attractive type of funding to apply for, having it in perpetuity versus matching one of the state's restrictions, which might be 40 years affordability restriction or 50 years affordability restriction, something like that.
That's actually a good question. This policy does not address affordability restrictions in perpetuity. I think that our Affordable Housing Trust has a practice of requiring affordability restrictions in perpetuity, but I don't quote me on that. I that's my understanding, but it is a question of what would be the impact of requiring a preservation restriction in perpetuity on an affordable unit. And that might be something to inquire with the Affordable Housing Trust when we're in the process of deliberating about a grant on that specific project.
Okay.
To
Any
me,
go ahead, David.
I'm sorry, that kind of to me begs another question, which I was kind of taking for granted, but if we've given money for historical preservation of a building that presumably we thought justified historic preservation, isn't that building kind of protected through other regulations or policies that you can't, so that historic use can't just be taken away, nothing to do with our grant. It's because it's it's historic.
If it's under a local historic district, there's a local regulation that has a similar level of review that will be applied to preservation restriction. They will have to, any development will have to go to the HPC for approval before they can do their work. But the preservation restriction is recorded at the registry, whereas the local historic district is a regulation which theoretically can be repealed at any time. So that's why it's not considered to be the same level of protection if it's under a local historic district. And there are some properties that are not under local historic districts. So they would, they could be placed under a local historic district, but that's a whole nother set of
that's
politics.
still not under any protection from the Registry of Deeds
Correct.
registration. Okay.
When we make a preservation restriction, who is usually given the task of monitoring it?
You.
Us, okay.
Yeah.
I've never been asked to make a visit.
You haven't yet, but it's another good question. So, we put this policy in place years ago with, the assumption that it would be carried out in this way, but without really examining what that means, what that looks like. And, some organization like Historic New England, when they have when they take on a preservation restriction, they actually require a substantial endowment that goes with it. And that endowment is used to fund the legal responsibility that they're taking on. And they go out every year and inspect the properties that they're holding the restriction for. And they will enforce on any changes that violate that restriction. So Somerville we've just in the last couple of years since I came on board, finally filed our first preservation restrictions at the registry that we created under the CPA program. And the HPC is the entity that has the responsibility to hold the preservation restriction for the city. But there isn't a plan for HPC, I don't think, you don't have the staff to go out and inspect all of those properties that you hold the restriction for. You do, I think the plan is just to treat it as if it was an LHD in perpetuity so that you have review over any changes that are going to take place on those properties. But that's not being, that's not carrying it out in the same way that an organization like Historic New England would do, that would take that responsibility.
Right.
So, you could consider requiring an endowment for projects that you assume the responsibility for, and that could potentially pay for some additional staff time to be able to fulfill that responsibility. But
Yeah.
that's a policy question I think is bigger than the CPC to make that.
Yeah, that is what that sounds like.
And it gets even
Go on.
more obtuse if you consider tax implications, that the person granting the easement presumably gets a tax break, which then
Yes.
to someone
Right.
else. Yeah.
I wanted to see if there's any last comments on this one. We should move on here relatively shortly since we have a lot to cover. But Roberta, for the sake of this meeting, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a motion required of this. I think you're just soliciting feedback and thoughts for a future
Yeah.
iteration of this, which we could conceivably vote to support at a future meeting. It sounds like that's correct. Any other kind of last thoughts on this? Maybe folks can spend a little more time with this draft document before the next meeting. If they have additional comments, we can discuss those there as this heads towards a final resolution or not. Anything else on somebody's mind right now? Okay.
I would just remind everyone that the next meeting is going to be the applicant presentations. So I don't anticipate that there will be time for any further policy discussion by the committee, but this document will perhaps, and the one that I shared or that I talked about earlier, the general conditions, I think we want to keep these in mind when the time comes for putting recommendations on, making recommendations, putting conditions on the recommendations that the committee makes in December or November.
Is this language an expansion of something that is in the general conditions existing?
So this would fall within the, I think the committee, we don't have a rules and regulations document. I do have a procedures document somewhere within the committee's documents about how you go, how you run your business, is where this would fall. Perhaps in the, it might become a part of the application materials so that applicants are aware of what the requirements might be, but there's some discretion that's built into this document so that you can consider projects on a case-by-case basis.
I'm just kind of glancing at the general conditions now. Would this generally replace that paragraph 6, the deed restriction paragraph? It would be in addition to that. It would be there'd be the deed restriction, and then also the kind of the money clawback component would be added to it.
Yes. So I think that we might, so paragraph 6 says that the I'm sorry, I'm reading paragraph 6 as as I say
And-
this.
No,
So,
and Ryan,
yeah,
I'm mindful.
paragraph 6 essentially says what this 3-page document states.
Yeah,
That it's required for acquisition and that it's at the committee's discretion for any other type of project. But so one of the change that I was most recently asked to add was the last sentence there: required deed restrictions must be executed by the grantee and assent forms must be signed by the mortgage holders before the funds will be dispersed. And the problem is that we can't ask the grantee to sign anything until we have the instrument approved and ready to be executed, and that alone can take over a year because of working with the state, the Massachusetts Historic Partnership or Mass Historic Commission. They have to approve any preservation restriction in perpetuity before it can be executed. And because there's such a bottleneck in that process, it would essentially make it impossible for us to give CPA funds to outside organizations outside of the city, to anybody for whom a preservation restriction would be required, because we couldn't give them the funds, we couldn't disperse the funds until after the state completed their process, which takes too long. And so when I brought this up to the law department, they agreed that that we need to come up with a more nuanced way of handling the requirement for restrictions. So it was this section 6 in this document that prompted me to draft this more nuanced policy.
Understood. Okay.
So I will prepare a new version of these for our November meeting. And it may be still just a discussion item and not something to be approved. But before you make recommendations, I think there needs to be a consensus about what the conditions are going to be based on an understanding of what the general conditions are already going to be.
Understood. Okay. Thank you for your work on that, Roberta. I know this is a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's move on to our next item here, which is the preliminary review of the application. So we have 8 here to go over. And I think, Roberta, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the intent here is for this to be basically just a first taste. We're not voting, obviously, on anything. We will have the presentations next meeting from the applicants. So hopefully we can kind of keep these nice and brief, maybe 4 or 5 minutes on each one. And this should be, I think, kind of just the table setter for folks to do a little research of what's in the meeting packet and come with questions next time so that we can actually ask the applicants directly anything we want to learn some more about. So if that makes sense to folks, Roberta, can you take us through, it looks like 12 Pleasant Avenue, SCLT is here first.
Sure. So I'm thinking about what is the best way for me to go through all of these efficiently, because we're going to be getting a full presentation from the applicants next time. I don't think
Yeah.
it's necessary to really describe all of them, but
Yeah.
does anyone have any questions or comments that would be helpful for me to share with the applicants to help them prepare for their presentations, is the question that I'd like to
Yeah,
raise about each of these.
Okay, and I would also kind of propose in the interest of efficiency that maybe you just kind of focus. I mean, like, kind of, you probably have taken some look at this. I mean, if there's things that you want to bring to our attention about these, that will help us better form questions before their presentations next month. I mean, it might just be that we don't have to hear about all of them, but the ones that you think warrant our extra attention.
Okay, I might,
I mean, with due respect
Yeah.
to Ryan.
absolutely. So 12 Pleasant Ave, the Somerville Community Land Trust, the biggest question that comes to my mind pertains to the conditions that you might place on this. So a question that you might have for them is whether they have a concern with a preservation restriction in perpetuity. Or, you may also have the option to have a preservation restriction, not in perpetuity, a term limited preservation restriction. So this is something that I think as committee members, you might be weighing in your mind. What are the, um, what are the terms of a grant that you'd consider for this project? I'm going to bring up actually the financial worksheet.
That would be that would be great. Just so we can see kind of order of magnitude,
Yeah.
who's asking for what. That'll kind of set the table for next week's or next month's discussion.
Yeah. And let's start the share.
I saw that the Union Square area had a strong showing this grant cycle round.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good tell, yeah.
we've
All right.
reached Union Square.
Yeah. Well, one of the sites in Union Square has not gone forward with applying for funds this round. Based on the conversations that I had with them preparing for the eligibility determination form, they determined that they needed to do some more homework before they would be ready to apply. So I think the outcome is good. Likewise, the St. James Episcopal Church also decided that they wanted to do some more homework before coming in with a grant application. So I think they're actually moving forward with a condition assessment and evaluating what are the potential uses that they want to aim for in their space. So it was a valuable discussion, but both of those two have pulled out for now.
Okay.
So sorry, I'm trying to adjust my screen. There we go. The Somerville Community Land Trust is requesting $373,000. And they gave a very detailed scope and budget for their for the project that they would be undertaking. We met with them a couple of times to go over everything that was in their scope, to consider whether there's anything that wasn't really CPA eligible in their scope. So Sarah and I think came to a consensus that that everything that's in their scope is eligible for CPA funding.
Okay. And just at a high level, I'm seeing this is a historic home. Do you mind if I share, Roberta, just a Google Street View of it?
Sure.
could be.
I may need to enable that.
Oh, okay. Folks, you can tell me if this isn't helpful. I find it, it's just since we're looking at these in quick succession, it's helpful to have these stick in my brain for next time.
Yeah, it's good to do. This happens to be about 200 feet from my house. I know the.
Oh,
building.
wow, nice. Okay.
It's currently like a 6-unit apartment building, I think.
Okay.
Which
And I'm seeing
which project is this? Are we talking about?
12
Still,
Pleasant Avenue.
Oh, okay, we're on the first. Okay.
so
Okay,
you can
yeah.
do it now.
Okay. Folks able to see it?
Yeah,
Okay.
now, yes. No, it's pretty.
Yeah. So it looks nice. It looks like the overall scope that we're going to hear about next time is over $4.5 million. 373 of which is being asked of our group. So a relatively small piece of what is clearly a costly project.
Mhm.
So interested to hear more about it. Any other context on this, Roberta?
No,
Okay. Okay, want to move on to the next one?
sure. So the next one is um, the 50 Bow Street brickwork project. So this is a continuation. I mean, this is what they'll tell you next time. It's a continuation of a project that they have been working on in the last couple of years. So they're asking for the CPC's help to address the front facade of a building that was formerly a fire station. I mean, not fire, police station for the city.
So it was, it's brick restoration on the front of that.
Yes.
And this, for people remember, it goes way back, was originally a police station, and the developers added, I think, the entire mansard top roof to it, if I remember correctly, and the tower and everything.
Mm.
And then turned into condos.
So this is the condo trust itself that is requesting these funds.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that is actually something that we need to address in the background, is to ensure that the condo trust is able to execute a contract. That's another situation that we haven't dealt with before that is a little bit more complicated than you might think on the surface.
Ah,
Okay. Has the CPC given money to this project before?
No,
Okay.
so it
So-
was go ahead.
Oh, just as a side,
Sorry.
I was thinking about this project though, when I was looking at some of your flow charts and in our previous discussion about whether the city has an interest in it. And of course, at a certain time, this was a city property, and then they sold it. And I wasn't sure if your thing considered that on in the flow chart about the city getting preservation funding and then 5 years later selling it to a developer.
Right?
But and this was actually the building I was thinking of, so it's ironic.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for Eric. So Eric, were you saying that they added the mansard roof, that wasn't original?
It was originally there, but it had been lost. And so I think it got recreated from old photos.
Oh,
It was actually kind of a cool thing they did. The slate is, I think, synthetic slate, if I remember correctly. It'd be something if you happen to know Christy Chase, if you can flag her down, she'd tell you all about it. She's down the street from it.
interesting. All right.
Okay.
Do you have any?
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if anyone has questions for me to pass on to the applicant or either applicant so far.
Well, I guess it would be good if they come in prepared for the questions about how we would be able to, the contract aspect of it. It would be
Okay.
nice for them to have thought about that.
Mhm.
Thanks.
And a question just of structure. Dan, I saw Dan Coughlin, he's a member of the Historic Commission. Does that affect anything, how I vote or any conflict of interest kind of stuff?
No, so they will be required to come to HPC for a advisory review. And I think he will not be able to participate in that conversation.
Okay.
I just
Here.
want to acknowledge that Joe's just joined us. Thank you for coming, Joe, and I apologize for having rescheduled the meeting, making everyone a little bit discombobulated this evening.
No,
myself
it's my
most of
fault
all.
for being a little late. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, we'll move on to the third one on here, which is the Elizabeth Peabody House.
So the Elizabeth Peabody House is a continuation of work that they have been doing for several years, both projects that CPA has funded and projects that they've found other funding sources for inside and outside of the building. And so this project is going to be to replace the cladding all around the building to make it something more historically accurate.
It looked based on a cursory reading that it was about the vinyl siding, which I'm guessing is what stretches back the sides here as opposed to the. Are these
Think that
shingles?
they may be replacing all of it.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
neither of those is original. I think
Okay.
according to the description in their application, the shingles, they think that it was originally clapboard.
Mm.
And that both the vinyl and the shingles are a newer treatment. So they're working with a specialist to look at to examine the original color for, to decide on what color it should be, and trying to do some forensic research to figure out what the original cladding would have been on the building so that they can recreate it.
And their estimate was 150. Did I remember seeing that in the spreadsheet?
Yes,
Okay.
150. No, 150 was for the brickwork, 250 for this project.
Okay.
I just wanted to say for Joe's sake that what we're doing is we're walk through the different grant applications, not voting tonight, but if there's any sort of questions that should be forwarded to the grantees that they could address next session, that kind of thing. But we're just we're taking a quick walkthrough.
Thanks, Evan.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, anything else on Elizabeth Peabody House? Hearing none, let's move on to the Nunziato Park. Place I know very well.
Great. Nunziato Park is looking for a water fountain a water fountain in the human section and another water feature in the dog section of the park.
I can provide a little background. on
John,
this.
yeah, I mean,
What?
well, John, you'll be doing that next week, so I don't
Yeah,
want
don't-
to spend a
Okay.
lot of time, or next month, or later this month when we meet again, but
Well, feel free to give us the elevator pitch here, John.
Elevator pitch is because of all of the sewer separation projects going on in the streets, they were able to stub in 2 new water connections into Nunziata Park. And with that, we pretty much are able to install 2 new water fountains. And although we do want to do some renovations to the park in the future, we think this is a great opportunity to implement drinking fountains as quickly as possible.
And what was the estimated cost?
I believe we put $200,000 for this.
Yeah.
So that would be purchasing 2 water fountains. We need to do the backflow preventer water cabinets, and just get their landscape architect or engineer to create us some quick drawings on it.
I'm curious, long ago, there was this big plan to put a ginormous water tank underneath that park. Is that gone as an idea?
I am not sure if they're still revisiting that. That would kind of be under the capital projects team that really looks at all the key areas. Once we get into revisiting the design of this, we'll have conversations with capital projects to see kind of what goals they have for stormwater phosphorus reduction in our parks.
Okay.
I thought I was taught we were supposed to call these things bubblers around here. Where do I find that in this proposal? Just kidding.
I usually don't use the word bubbler, but with this job, I've been using it a lot because when I say drinking fountain or I just say fountain, people think of like a water fountain or a splash pad or something. So bubbler,
is what I
people
thought.
immediately understand what you're talking about.
Now you
I'll
can just
pull
say
from that.
bottle fill station.
There you go.
Yeah, but so we are looking like in the dog park section, we're gonna have the little dog bowl feature as well, but not in the
Yeah.
human section.
Great.
Maybe, I mean, I don't wanna, get too deep into our questions this time around. It's kind of tricky when we have the committee member is also going to be the presenter, so it's very tempting to have the whole presentation and discussion when that's not what was on the agenda.
Yeah.
So just our preliminary, I think our preliminary review just wants to get at, is there anything that's not in the application that we want to ask for more information about before next time? And that would, I think, also go for the Open Space Acquisition Fund and the Quincy Street Park.
Would you like a quick elevator pitch on Quincy Street, or was my elevator pitch too long?
No, let's hear it.
So Quincy Street, the boardwalk is not doing so hot, and our plantings, we would like to diversify the type of plantings there. Some bulbs are doing really successful, but we think there's definitely opportunities to enhance it, especially with the new pollinator action plan coming out. We want to kind of take some of the plantings from there and incorporate it into Quincy Street. The boardwalk, there's a big rat problem underneath the boardwalk. The
Yeah.
boardwalk definitely makes the perfect environment for rats, and there's just been some needed repairs on it. So we definitely think it's a good opportunity to look at making improvements to the park. We think the idea of the park is perfect and we think the design is really good. We just want to kind of ameliorate some of the issues that have been going on in the park.
Great. Great, you wanna,
Sorry, I was trying and failing
That's
to
all
share my
right.
screen there. Now I'm late, but there it is.
thanks, that's helpful.
Okay, anything we want to talk about the open space acquisition? I know that's not necessarily tied to a specific place at proposal stage, correct?
I guess just one clarification or added conversation to the open space fund is what we did is we kind of figured out what it would cost for Quincy Street and Nunziato, and then just took the remaining balance and put that into the open space acquisition fund. If any of our numbers go down or change, we would look for the remaining balance to just kind of get put into that open space acquisition fund.
Okay. David, did you have some?
No, I just wanted to thank them
Okay.
for doing that, for just putting in, the open space acquisition funds. I know we kind of fell through the cracks last year.
I apologize about that. Definitely on the top of the list this time.
On the note of Open Space Acquisition Fund, I don't know if I mentioned this to the committee before, but a minor issue that I've been working on in the background for as long as I've been working for the city is that several years ago, one of the tranches that went to the Open Space Acquisition Fund was accidentally directed to be put into the wrong account that the city has for a different purpose. And it was a matter of throughout all of the documents, throughout the the recommendation that the CPC voted on and the city council motion that was submitted, it was called the wrong thing. And because it was called the wrong thing, it was directed to the wrong place. And so I've been working on a correction for that for a long time. And I will send you all a memorandum when the time comes that I'm actually able to resolve that, but it has been kind of a comedy of errors trying to get that resolved ever since.
I have a question. It sort of harkens to Quincy Street a little bit. So the CPA funds should not be used for maintenance or deferred maintenance.
Mhm.
And so it gets to be a little bit of a blurred line with renovations, whether that's maintenance or renovation. So if I would ask them in the presentation to try and make that case that this is not maintenance.
Yes, I can definitely work that into the presentation.
Great.
Okay. All right, I think the next one on here is the Somerville Veterans Memorial Cemetery, which is a space I do not know much about. So excited to learn more about it. Looks like it is out near Clarendon Hill.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's a request for $54,000.
Yeah. So the Veterans Services Division is requesting funds to make improvements to to restore several elements of the cemetery. And their application has been increasingly detailed as they go along. So I appreciate that they've been able to fill in some of the gaps that were missing early on to detail exactly what are the elements that they're trying to restore and to get estimates for that restoration.
Okay.
And this is under historic preservation
Yes.
funding.
One of the things that is missing right now is that this is one site that has not it's not under a local historic district. It doesn't already have a designation that signifies that it's historic. So in addition to a advisory review by HPC, they also need to have a determination of historical significance
Yeah.
by HPC.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions to note on this one? Okay. And then the last one, I apologize, I skipped it in the list, was from the Somerville Museum, which I believe is effectively a resubmission of the one that we examined late last fiscal year with some small changes, it seems like. So I know that's a proposal most of us are familiar with, and so we'll hear about what the changes, what the tweaks are.
Correct. They went and requested updated estimates for the work from the vendors that they would be working with.
Got it.
I have a not really a super formal question, but last time we had a off-cycle request for City Hall repairs that came in kind of the last minute and sucked some of the air out of the room. Do we have any idea what might be coming our way, if anything, with respect to that project?
It is scheduled to get started within the next couple of weeks.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Great.
So I don't know if we anticipate a next phase or any expansion of that project. So it's to be determined if they're going to be able to complete it on the budget that they have. But, you know, once they start working on that building, there's, I'm sure, quite a lot that can be improved after they get started. So I think the question was always, where do we draw the line for this phase? Versus coming back and getting money to do the whole project.
Thanks for asking that, Eric. I had the same question. I was up on Highland the other day. I was like, I wonder what the status is of that money. So thanks, Roberta.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're through all of the preliminary applications. And any closing thoughts on that before we move on? Hearing none.
This was helpful. I
let's-
appreciate
Go ahead.
this. This is good. I appreciated this little overview.
Yeah, Roberta, I think this is really good just to get us thinking about these. And now when we're moving around town, we can see these spaces and think about them on our own terms, which I know I like to do. Okay, let's talk now about the CPA surcharge conversation and the potential endorsement of a ballot initiative. Roberta, you want to take us away on this one?
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to take a moment to open the material that I put in your meeting packet. So there's a summary of the ballot question, which is, it's oriented sideways. My apologies for that. I guess it was because it was copied from a PowerPoint presentation. So the summary is what was presented to the in all of the ward meetings. The mayor's city hall ward meetings that she's holding this month in every ward, and some meetings that are in other languages. She asked me to provide a presentation, an explanation of the ballot question requesting an increase in the CPA surcharge. And I've also provided for you what is on a flyer that I have to hand out to people at the events that I've been going to this season. And so you're all familiar with the ballot question. And at this point, I'm not a part of it. I didn't have anything to do with founding it, but there is a group that has established a committee to promote a Vote Yes on 6 campaign for the city. And so I was advised by the law department that if you were inclined, I cannot go around telling people to vote yes on 6, but I can tell people that the committee has endorsed a vote of yes on 6. So I wanted to give you the option, if you were inclined, to make that endorsement, if you felt that it was appropriate. But that's the committee's choice whether you would want to promote or endorse the ballot question.
I would support the committee endorsing the ballot initiative, a vote yes on 6.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah.
I would support it, but Roberta, can I personally support it being a city staff member?
As a committee member, you can endorse it. What you can't do is to go out and give your make an unsolicited appeal for the ballot question in another context. But in a public, like in the committee meeting, in the context as a committee member, you can, I think, join in the support of the ballot question.
Even if I'm a committee member representing the city?
You're as a, I think as a, I mean, as a committee member, I mean, I am not the law department here. So
Yeah.
if you choose to abstain, I think that's a safe choice if you want to abstain, but I think that there wouldn't be a problem with your voting as a committee member.
Okay.
But if you prefer to be on the safe side, I don't see a problem with that either.
Okay.
And that is just because John is a employee of the city, right?
Yeah.
Because I, as a committee member of on the commission, it's not like I would run into the same issue then.
Right.
Yeah, same for me, and I don't think it is. I'm a volunteer, on another commission. I don't think that
Okay.
affects my ability
Mhm.
to endorse stuff.
Okay. Anybody
It
have any
would mean
feelings or just,
Very
I'll go
few
ahead.
of us be able to vote if
Yes.
people representing different divisions of the city weren't allowed to vote.
That is true. That is true. Any other thoughts or discussion folks want to have specifically about the ballot itself and the idea of us as a committee endorsing it?
I'm all for it.
Okay. Okay. Well, if no further comments, I would welcome a motion to formally support this.
I make a motion that we approve endorsing a yes vote on ballot 6.
I'll second.
Thank you, Roberta.
All right, I will call the roll. Ryan,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
John,
I'm going to abstain.
and Joe.
I'm gonna abstain too. I have a job with the city.
All right.
Thank you all.
And, thank you.
Okay,
I've-
on to our final two. Roberta, you have the count, okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, and update from the public outreach subcommittee. I can't remember the formal name of it. If there's any updates to give.
So the subcommittee as a subcommittee hasn't met for a while, but
Yeah.
Heather, maybe you can give a review of your experience with your recent outreach.
Yeah, so yeah, the committee hasn't met for a while. Hopefully we'll re-engage now. But I went to the community day at Tufts and we did outreach there along with the Medford folks. It was a really terrific day, terrific weather, terrific there, and tremendous outflow of people. And we talked a lot about both the ballot initiative, or I did as a committee member, as well as educating people about what we do, and so that was a good day. And I guess there's another Monster Mash is coming up at the end of this month. I know Jahan is signed up for that, and it probably needs another person to help him out on that. So think about it. He needs another hand.
Yeah,
Likewise.
I might be able to help with that. I think my wife is already tabling another group, so in for a dime, in for a dollar, I guess.
Great. Thanks both. Heather, anything you wish you had that we should think about having in terms of physical assets or other support for events like that in the future?
No, I think that, over the last couple of years, we've developed more materials. I think the little 3-ring binder still is like really useful just to show
Mhm.
people places that they recognize and know. There was something that, Roberta, you were thinking about. Was it a dolly or an easel? There was some little bit of equipment you were thinking about adding to the kit, but I do think that like trying to kind of encourage people to join committees and to get involved is a nice added thing to the tabling versus just like trying to get them to vote on the budget stuff, but trying to kind of make them think about how they could get involved. There's a lot of committees that need people.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah, Roberta, you have a spreadsheet, I know, with the events and the tabling events and the volunteers. And I know that I volunteered for stuff, but I have absolutely no idea what I volunteered for or when it is.
I will share the screen. I have that up right now and I can show you what you've agreed to.
I can empathize with that.
So we have coming up this week, actually on Wednesday, I'm going to be at the Davis Square Farmers Market, and one of my staff colleagues has volunteered to join me at the Davis Square Farmers Market. Although if anyone else was available, it's always, the more the merrier. And David, you agreed to Saturday, October 19th.
Right. But I may need to renege on that because
Okay.
I think, and I'm glad that we wrote this up, because I think I'm going to be away and coming back in time for Monster Mash, but I don't know if I'll be back on Saturday.
Mhm.
So I don't know if there's anyone else that can cover for me or do the.
I'm out of town.
It's a big market if people haven't been to it. A lot of people go to the Union Square.
Yeah, I anticipate it's going to be a very busy day.
But I mean, and I'll keep it in mind if it turns out that my trip falls through, but I would like to take my name off it, unfortunately.
Okay.
Understood. And unfortunately, I'll be out of the country. Okay. All right, so the ones pending on here, it looks like are October 9th in 2 days, if anybody's free for that
Mhm.
one. And then it's the Monster Mash, which it sounds like we're in good shape.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Oh,
at
and
the
I
bottom,
skipped
I
the
have
Union Square one.
an
Yeah.
additional list of events, but I think these have all passed now. And these were events that I did not commit to tabling at, but I knew that were happening. But I think
Gotcha.
that
Okay.
there's no more opportunities this fall besides the ones that I've indicated.
Okay. Good stuff. Thanks to folks
Yeah.
who have volunteered. And thanks, Roberta, for all your work on that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, new members. And the search
So-
for new members.
Yes. Search committee update. We received 17 applications from really high quality applicants as well, narrowing down to interviewing 6 to fill 2 positions was already challenging. And so we're in the midst of interviewing those people right now. And so hopefully within the next 2 weeks, we will have made a selection of who to recommend for the role. And then after that, the process is out of our hands. I can try to push it as well as I can, but
Can I ask if you have ones that you think look good for a conservation commission? You send them over to Malik? Because I think we have 2 openings on the conservation commission.
yeah, amazingly, I've had a few people turn up who would be potential,
Yeah.
potential,
I
like
think-
really good people for the Historic Preservation Commission.
Yeah, right. Similarly, I think it'd be great to try and direct people to, if you don't get this, please consider this,
Yeah. It was my hope with I was trying to, as I showed you a couple months ago, I was trying to come up with new tabling materials that highlighted opportunities to apply for boards and committees. And when I road tested it, it didn't really work all that well. It didn't work as well as our old budgeting exercise for an interactive activity. So that's why I've gone back to the budgeting exercise. But I have included, I've kept a flyer inviting people to fill out an interest form if they might possibly be interested in any boards and committees. And I have a poster showing what all the different boards and committees are and what kinds of decisions they make. And there's been some interest in that, and I've had a few people fill out the interest form. So we can continue to try to find that person to apply. I remember, David, when you were helping with the library last year,
Mhm.
there was somebody who recognized you
Yeah.
from a professional event, and we didn't have that interest form ready or anything like that at the time, but there's somebody out there who
There's at least that one
who has
person.
the expertise,
Yeah.
who would be the person you're trying to recruit if only we run into him again.
Well, thanks for road testing that material and for doing your part to increase civic engagement in general. It's a really tall order. It's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
General, but worthy, very worthy.
And that's actually a good example of why it's really helpful when more people come with me to do the tabling, because people I don't know,
Right.
and they start conversations that wouldn't happen if it was just me. So, it's great to have more conversation.
That's fantastic. Great job, Roberta. Great job, folks that were involved in this new member search as well. 17 applications, and hearing that so many are so qualified is really, really cool.
Yeah, we're
and
jealous.
great for us.
We've
Yeah.
been down like 2 or 3 members on the Historic Commission forever. I'm wondering if the trick is the fact that you're giving out money. So I wonder if we should find a way to give out money as part of this Historic Commission role.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah.
People
yeah.
know this is the coolest group, so that word travels fast around town.
Yeah.
I did
Oh,
want
that's good.
to give one more update. I included in your meeting packet this document called Art Farm Correction Memorandum. And so this is, another project that keeps coming back and having to put it on the agenda. I have actually submitted it to City Council now, so it should be going to City Council anytime. It's under review. I think it may actually be cleared to go on an upcoming council agenda. But as I was preparing the submission for City Council, I realized that the way that the recommendation was drafted, copying the recommendation from 2017 or whenever it was that this was originally proposed, the funds were coming from the wrong accounts. So I had to make a correction so that it would come from the right accounts, and submitted this as part of the application, or part of the packet for the council order. And so I just wanted to bring this to your attention. There's no action needed from you, but I needed to close the loop.
Okay.
Understood. Thank you. Okay. With that, any other new business from Roberta or the broader group? Okay. We're
I
hearing none.
just have a
Oh, no, go
question
ahead.
actually about the ARC fund one. So does it change our available reserve at this point, or it's really just moving things around? That doesn't change our.
It does not change our available reserve. We have been holding the funds in the open space and recreation reserve ever since 2017. And so those funds are still available. It's the funds were originally scheduled to come out of the budgeted reserve, but of course that is put back into the undesignated fund every year. And so the recommendation that we originally drafted said that it would come from I believe it said that it would come from the budgeted reserve, but that's not actually where you want the funds to come from. You've been reserving funds from the undesignated reserve for the last 5 years. And it's those undesignated funds that you want to use, not this year's budgeted. So I could have put it through using this year's budgeted reserve, but then I felt that would have been very confusing in terms of identifying how much funding is available for this year's projects.
Yeah.
So since many agendas, many reports have identified those funds in the undesignated fund as being earmarked for this project, I thought that the cleanest thing to do would be to draft this memorandum, pulling the funds out of undesignated rather than the budgeted reserve.
Okay.
Okay. Any other new business?
I guess want to say one more thing about Art Farm is that if you have the opportunity to, I ought to share pictures one of these days. I don't have it ready to share at the moment, so I'm not going to delay you anymore. But if you have the opportunity to look at it before they close it up, they are doing the most incredible work. It's like building an underground coliseum over there under the Art Farm site. John, what was the size of the tank? It's like 40 million gallons.
40 million gallons. It's 40 feet deep, 120. It's oval shaped, so 120 by like 130 feet wide. I'm trying to find some pictures. Louisa took some awesome.
Can we get in there or get close enough to see it, or do we need to get like a tour?
We were able to arrange a tour. I'm not sure how strict they are with allowing people to view this. We had to have all of the safety gear to be able to tour the site. But I don't know if there's I don't know if there's a way that you can get clearance to be able to tour the site. I may be able to pull up a photo very quickly myself.
We can't do a CPC site visit.
Maybe a Conservation Commission site visit would be great.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could ask and see if that's possible. I don't know how much longer before they start closing it up as well.
And this will only fill up when we get stormwater, like big storm surges. That's the idea.
Yeah, and it's divided in half so that they fill up the first half and then it can either overflow or just be pumped straight out to the Charles River is where the water goes after some treatment.
Huh. Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not it's not going to store it and then bleed it back in during dry weather. It's treat and release.
That's correct. It's really just as we like to say, a Tupperware container, or as Louisa likes to say, a Tupperware container. So it's really just holding back the peak flow.
Okay. Well, because sometimes when you do that, it holds back enough for capacity downstream to open up again, and then you bleed it back into the. Although it's stormwater, right? So it always was going after, or was it going to MWRA?
It's going, so it's stormwater, but I believe it's going back to the MWRA or Deer Island. But I believe there is eventually going to be a connection to this MBTA easement that
okay.
takes the stormwater to the Charles instead of the Mystic. So we have to work with Cambridge on that.
Well, I'm sure there's a website that tells me all this if I looked.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't happen to have the photos. I wish that I had thought to put them in the packet.
Yeah,
So they're not handy. So we'll share them all with you next time so you can see what it looks like in there before it's closed up.
Very cool. Thanks for highlighting that.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for the good of the group? Hearing none. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roberta, can you read it
I'll
all?
call the roll. David,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
John,
yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
All right. All in the affirmative. Thank you all, and thank you, Ryan, for stepping in on the last notice. And
No
my
worries.
apologies for missing the meeting last week. This is keeping on top of all of the communication this season has been quite a lot. So
No worries. Thanks
Yeah.
for helping us reschedule, and thanks everybody for
Yeah.
bearing with me.
And I didn't mention in the updates that you will be seeing postcards come in the mail very soon. We're very close to having postcards ready to celebrate the 10-year anniversary.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right.
All right, gang. Thank you
Good.
very much.
All right,
Okay,
thank
bye.
you.
Thank
Bye
you.
all.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.